Subscribe and click the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications from the Indian Express.
Hello, my name is Pawan and I am the father of two girls aged 4 and 1. I'm joined today by Matthew Raggett, headmaster of the Doon School, who has written a book that I recommend enthusiastically on raising kids who love to learn. I think we'd all want to raise kids who love to learn, and there are few people better qualified than Matthew to tell us how. Matthew has lived and worked around the world before taking over as head of the Doon School. Could you tell us a bit about yourself before we start talking about your book?
Certainly. So I'm an enthusiastic student of children, of parents, of learning, and of India as well, since I've lived here for the last 3 years. I grew up in the UK, went to a government school in the UK and to university there, studied physics. Went into teaching because I wanted to do something that wasn't lining other people's pockets and was actually, fun and engaging. And I don't know, you've worked with adults, but I think working with children is way more interesting than working with adults. They're great people. And it's taken me around the world. I've worked in Vienna, in Austria, in Canada, Singapore, Spain, Germany, and then the chance was offered to come and work in India. And we have 3 children who've also grown up around the world. And before they started leaving home and going to college, we wanted them to see somewhere that was a bit different from the places that they'd lived so far. Somewhere that was magical, a little bit chaotic, and just welcoming. And that was India. So that's how we ended up here.
So one of the most interesting things in the book, for me at least, was the Indian Summer Project that you talk about. And could you tell us a little bit about that? What motivated you to do this, and how did it actually turn out?
Well, the Indian Summers came from the production house in the UK, who had read a report published by the Sutton Trust that said the lowest performing boys in the UK are white working class boys, and the highest performers are boys of Indian origin. One of the guys who worked at that production company was Indian origin. He thought it would be a great experiment to take some British boys and put them in a very Indian environment. So when he asked everyone he knew, what's the best Indian environment to do this in, the Doon School was...
I'm not sure most people would describe Doon as a very Indian environment, but it's certainly one kind of Indian environment.
It's one kind. But when you're talking about schools, and when he sat in London having this conversation. So what's the famous Indian school that you're going to hear about in London? It was the Doon School. So they got in touch with us, and a lot of people, because of the nature of the school, a lot of people get in touch and would like to do things with us. So we're a little bit suspicious sometimes and a bit careful about who we do things with, but we always listen because we're fundamentally curious. I mean, if you're not curious as an educational institution, what are you doing? So we got to know them, got to know what they were thinking, and then started to think, how would this be not just for the boys coming from the UK, because sure, it'll be a great experience for them, but what will it be like for our boys? What will they learn? So, all the time we're thinking, what can we learn? And then what will the staff learn? And the most interesting thing was actually what the staff learned, because we.
So just to be clear, this involved a group of boys coming, a television crew from the UK, from this production house, staying at the school with them for a year and chronicling their experience at Doon. And these were 5 white working class boys from Britain.
That's right.
And how did it turn out for them and for the Doon School, both for students and teachers?
Yeah. So these 5 boys from very different parts of the UK, Wales and Brighton and Hull and Essex as well, came over, and they were really trying to find themselves in an educational environment. They hadn't had any success in the UK. They hadn't found the adults that would work for them. And they also had been, I think, let down by their parents as well, by the job that they'd done of preparing them to succeed, both in school and then in life afterwards. They found it very, very difficult to come. I mean, there's a culture shock whenever you move somewhere new. And the difference between their experience in the UK and the experience of, first of all, India, and then secondly Doon. So there's two culture shocks almost, because we know that we have boys coming over from England on exchange. So a boy who comes from Eton College or a boy who comes from St Edward's School in Oxford, they fit into Doon. There's a way of doing things. There's a vocabulary that they understand. But these boys coming from their government schools in the UK had no concept of living with your teachers. A fully residential school. The worst nightmare these boys could have was to live with their teachers. Like what? But actually, they did learn that, goodness me, these adults are really interested in my success, and they found that they'd not received that kind of input before. I think they also found that out of their own peer group, they were also able to learn new things, because peer groups they're great for learning from, but they're also great for stopping learning sometimes. They tease each other, they egg each other on to do certain things, and they found a new peer group, and they were stunned that the boys at Doon were interested in learning, and interested in where they would go next and what they would be doing, and interested in working hard for this reward later on. They hadn't seen that degree of conscientiousness before. So that was new for them. For our teachers, it was new to work with boys who weren't intrinsically motivated. So that was quite a shock. A lot of our teachers, who are great practitioners in the classroom, hadn't realised that their classroom management is taken care of by having kids who are ready and willing to learn. So these 5 boys from the UK were not trained in being ready and willing to learn.
So it was more challenging to exercise pedagogical authority with a set of students who weren't really well disposed to accept it.
Yeah, these students were used to school being entertainment for them and their friends. So going into a mathematics class, sitting down, being ready to work, they would look around and they'd be thinking, where's the fun? What can I do? What's the next thing I can do to draw attention or to look great in front of my mates? Well, the answer is, at this school, you look great in front of your mates by doing well academically, by being a great team member, by achieving something, by writing this, by having that published. They had no frame of reference for that.
And is that then the appropriate way, the efficient way to exercise authority as a parent or teacher, to shape a set of values that encourages the child to respect and to respect the right things and to seek out praise for what you would like them seeking out praise for?
I suppose there's a very deep question there about where does intrinsic motivation come from? Where that desire to do something, that desire and being prepared to work hard to achieve something. How do you give that to a child? The Harvard study in adult development that's been going on for sort of 85 years now has shown that the most valuable thing you can give, or the key to success and happiness, or they call it life course functioning, is, are you conscientious, and do you maintain good relationships with people? And if you can get those two things working, then you will be able to succeed no matter what path you go down, no matter what socioeconomic background you're from, no matter what life's ups and downs are. Those are the things to give a child: conscientiousness and good relationships.
So let's talk about each one of those in turn, right? As a parent, how do you inculcate conscientiousness in a kid?
Yeah. So I think one of the things you've got to accept about conscientiousness is that you're being prepared to work for something later on, or you're developing a habit of putting some time in now for something where the reward isn't immediately obvious. And that's tough, isn't it? Because kids love rewards, and parents also love praising kids. But praise doesn't always lead to the things that you expect. Participation certificates, getting rewarded for things that actually didn't require any effort or intrinsic skill that's been developed, doesn't help children. Alfie Kohn, an American writer, has written something called Punished by Rewards, where he looks at the effects of giving rewards, giving bonuses, giving prizes, titles, all of these things that people chase. And I see it a lot here. Kids in schools in India chase a lot of titles, prizes, certificates. And some of them figure out at the end of their time at school, that wasn't the best use of my time, actually. And it wasn't really what I was interested in, but I was wanting to make myself look good in front of this person or that.
Should we be rewarding effort? I mean, there are a lot of writers who say that the appropriate thing to reward is effort. So you should praise a kid for taking a class that's very difficult, or trying their hand at a new sport they're not very good at, rather than acing a test in a subject they're already good at, or doing something that comes very naturally to them.
Yeah, I think recognizing effort is enormously important, and that effort normally comes as part of a process. And the thing that again builds conscientiousness is understanding process. And I think schools nowadays should be looking more at process and skill development. Knowing stuff is no longer very useful. Right?
So the idea of being a role model is crucial, and in that, I think you mentioned that in the book as well. If your kids don't see you reading, they are not going to read. If they don't see you being great at reaching out and building relationships with people, they are not going to do it.
Yeah.
That puts a lot of pressure on a parent, doesn't it? I mean, if we're not going to be these perfect entities.
Right. So we all want our children to be better than us.
Right.
That's a normal parental thing. Yeah. But I mean, it's just unrealistic to think they're going to be fantastic if we're not. I mean, what are you doing as a parent, right? If you're wanting this but doing that, that's just inconsistent. And I think those kind of inconsistencies children find really difficult to navigate. It makes them uncertain. It makes them anxious sometimes. And I know that some of the kids who have a hard time managing their lives at school are kids who have a hard time managing around home as well. They've got parents who are unfortunately not able to give them the time that they need. I mean, time is the most valuable thing you can give as a parent. I mean, you've got to go into being a parent with your eyes open, that this is something that's going to require a huge amount of input. I mean, if I buy an insurance policy that matures in 18 years, I can do that once and perhaps leave it. If I'm active, I might look every few years at what it's doing. This child, who I'm going to have now, will be an adult in 18 years. That's the maturity point. What am I going to do along the way? Because if I do as little as I do with some aspects of my life, that kid's going to learn things from everybody else. So you're a teacher as a parent. You're the first and most important teacher.
Perhaps one way to look at it is you may not have full control over your talents, right? So we may not all be great readers, writers, athletes, whatever we'd want our children to be, but we do have some level of control over the choices we make. So if you choose to pick up a book, if you choose to go out for a run, if you choose to not watch TV and instead engage in some sort of spirited conversation in the family room, those are all choices that a kid can recognize, and those choices, I suppose, end up shaping a kid's values. And values are really the only thing you have control over, to the extent you have control over over anything. Is that sort of the right way to look at it? That if I'm picking up the book, if I'm eating healthy, if I'm exercising, if I'm polite or trying to be polite, if I'm helpful, my child is going to recognize that this is the way I'm expected to be. And even if you're not successful along all those dimensions, the kid at least recognizes that you're trying to do your best along all of those dimensions.
No, I agree. I think something we don't do enough of is explicitly talk about our choices with our children, and even teachers don't explicitly do it enough. So if I'm behaving in a particular way, if I'm treating a person in a particular way, if I'm pointing something out, I might be hoping that my child imbibes or picks up on some sort of messaging, but there's a conversation that's always worth having as well about here's why I made that choice. Here's why we could do this. Or you can ask it in reverse. Ask the child the question: why do you think we did that? Did you notice how that person responded when we approached them in that way? or I wonder why that person was, behaving in this particular way. We need to sort of engage at another level about the choices that we make.
So one thing that you talk about in the book that I know is a concern for parents in India and really around the world is getting your kid to read, right? It's trickier in a world where there's so much electronic media. With the OTT revolution, you've got pretty much anything you want to watch on your iPad. Do you have some rules of thumb, some pointers for parents in terms of how they can give their kid the best shot at becoming, a good reader or, someone who relates to books well?
Sure. I mean, I suppose a simple rule is, if you don't read, they won't. If you want them to read, make sure they see you reading. And it's something that you can be doing together. I think that's important. As soon as a child is able to sit in your lap, you can hold a book in front of them. There's beautifully created books for us to read with our children. But you can, again, you're talking about what you're reading as well. You're inviting them to reflect and to be critical on what they're reading, even with very, very simple questions. So, I think back at one of my kids' favourite book for a long time was the book about the bunnies loving each other all the way to the moon and back.
Yes.
Very, very simple book.
I love you this much.
Yeah, I love you this much. I love you. But everything that's on that page invites a question. And if you're prepared to think of those questions and to invite your child to articulate whatever they're thinking, then you're again giving them the chance to do something more with a book than just look at it. So a book isn't simply entertainment, in that way, Animal Farm would just be a story about animals on a farm. But it's not. It's about something much deeper. So how does a child learn to look at those things more deeply?
And there's been a big debate among educators on the appropriate use of technology in the classroom, and also among parents in terms of how much access you really give kids to television, the iPad, things like that.
I think that technology is a tool, isn't it? It's something that you use to get a particular job done, and whether that job is communicating, whether that job is adding things up or sharing a particular idea. At school, what we are trying to do is make sure that we use technology for the thing that makes sense. So you're not trying to use a laptop to replace paper, but you are trying to you will use a laptop to automatically collect data and turn it into a graph that you can then analyze. That's interesting, and it helps you. It helps you learn new ways of doing things with information and knowledge to grow understanding. Technology as entertainment, which is what it's become, is it's addictive. It's important to make sure that if you're giving someone a machine that is as addictive as a drug that you wouldn't want them having, that you might want to be there whilst it's going on. So if you're using it to entertain, then share that entertainment with them. But actually, why don't you just use your time with them to do something that's even more interesting? Of course, we're not all in a position, we don't all have gardens, we can't all go out on a bike, we don't all have a library next door, but we are in a position to have some good books, we are in a position to have some games that we can play, we're in a position to create things that we do together as well. Yeah, and I think that again, conscientiousness and habit forming. So we're trying to help our children form good habits, yeah? And the habit of resorting to a device is a problem, I think. But we have to look very carefully at ourselves. I remember the first drug education program that I took part in as a teacher. The first thing they did was ask us to look at our own drug use, and you're thinking, what drug use? But then they start talking about, well, coffee. It has an effect on you. It has an effect on you that you like. When do you have it? How much do you have it? When do you restrict yourself? What do you like when you don't have it? And if you're a smoker, it's another kind of drug. If you drink alcohol, it's another kind of drug. I have a friend who runs a drug center in Leipzig. For him, the most dangerous thing you can get now is a mobile phone. That's what they worry about more than crystal meth, more than opioids, more than marijuana use. It's what kids choose to do with their cell phones. And as parents, we've just got to be aware as well. Where are our phones? Is it here? Is it here, and do I respond to it when it does something? Because all of those things are messages to our kids.
One of the most important choices we make on behalf of our children is the school we send them to. And because in India, at least, most schools run K through 12, the children really have no say in this. We take them to a school, we research the school, we make whatever effort we can to get into the school. What should we be looking for in a school?
So if you look around, the things that schools advertise might make you think, those are the things that I should look for in a school. So, they advertise toppers. I don't think schools produce toppers at all. Parents produce toppers. That's the outcome of conscientiousness. Is it infrastructure? Is it having a 50-meter pool that isn't green? Is it having air conditioning in the corridors and classrooms? Again, you can put money into a school and have great infrastructure, but it doesn't mean that that's going to turn into learning. Are the children happy in schools? That's far more important than what does the school look like, what's the quality of the coffee shop for the parents, how fancy is the furniture, does everyone have an Apple computer that they get given when they come to school? So you've got to visit schools when you're making these choices, right? You're not reading out of brochures. You're listening to your friends, perhaps. You're talking. Word of mouth is the best way to. The clues I think to look for are any interactions where you've got the adults and the children of that school together. That's where you're going to see things like warmth. You're going to see connection. The relationship between a student and a teacher is far more important for learning than the teacher's grades at university or their subject expertise. So check for that relationship. How do the kids interact with each other? I mean, if they won't let you into the school, you can at least look outside the school and see the children leaving and look at the way that they communicate with each other. Can you imagine your child with those children? Do they look happy? Do they look like they like each other? These are things
one of the choices the parents in India face now is that of whether they should send their child to a school that follows an international board versus an Indian board.
Certainly at the primary stage, again, the schools advertise what they call a curriculum. Most of the time they're talking about an exam board, not a curriculum. So the curriculum is what that school puts together day on day, week on week, over a course of time. The board is just an assessment tool that you use in the 10th and 12th to gain admission to the next stage. Early on, it's all about that relationship. It's about that quality of nurturing. It's about how much time do you want your kid to spend on a bus each day? Do they need to go to an international branded school at that age? Probably not. If you've got teachers who care about them and who are developing their social skills, developing their confidence, that really matters. But then if they've got great teachers who have been, who developed their skills in that international program, possibly that will give them a different way of thinking. They may enjoy the nature of those classes more. But again, it's that human relationship. That's going to be the best thing at an early age. I think that when you go to a secondary school, that's when you might want to start looking at what's the exam board that they use at the end. Where does my child hope to go and study one day? Because there's no point in going to that IB school if you want them to go to St. Stephen's, because the results don't come out in time to start the year.
There are three things that you emphasize in the book as being core to education that are best inculcated by parents, and that if a parent doesn't inculcate them at a very young age, it's very difficult for a school to do much about it. Could we talk about these three things?
Yeah, absolutely. So as parents, what are we giving our children? A foundation for succeeding. right? And helping them to find that success more easily is of course an advantage. If we're not developing our child's love of reading and desire to read, then we're letting them down. I mean, reading causes thinking. Yeah. So if you want your child to think, then you get them to read, and they need to see you reading. You do it with them. The other skills that they need to be acquiring are the capacity to speak, but not speak as in talk and just functionally communicate, but the idea that speaking is our thinking that's made visible to others. So how do we make sure that our children are invited to share their thought processes? That's an interesting conversation, not simply observational or transactional speaking. Yeah? And then writing as well. Writing as an exercise in reflection, as an exercise in personal thought. Certainly when I want to think about something very deeply, I'll write it, because it's getting me to turn my thinking into something that's real, and then read it back and think, hang on a second, that idea isn't developed enough yet. So reading, speaking, and writing are all aspects of thought.
But anyone who's upper middle class in India is enormously privileged relative to the vast majority of people that live in this country. How should parents grapple with the issue of privilege?
One of the things we are doing in our life skills program at school is making sure that the boys there are aware of their privilege. You're right, we're completely blind to it. So we have to give them experiences through which they understand, oh yeah, that's me. That's the place I have in this world. That's how lucky I am. And understand that you've won a lottery to be here in some ways. So that's important. And service learning, experiences of working for others are very important. Our boys are gardening every day at school. Our boys are working in the kitchen every day at school. They're little things, but they give them a chance to see from another perspective what goes into an aspect of the world that's usually hidden to them. So many of those tasks are brilliant opportunities to practice delaying gratification. So cooking, baking, preparing something that will be ready in a few hours. That's extending your gratification. That's helping you learn about work and conscientiousness. I mean, so much of what we see in schools nowadays with kids coming in, there's almost an expectation that I will be able to do things well, get it right, and it'll happen for me. It's not an expectation. It happens with hard work. It happens with practice. It happens when you put effort in over time. So all of these little tasks, things that we can give our children to do, where we think, oh, we have this help at home, isn't that lovely? It is lovely. Actually, it's denying some learning experiences. Use it as an experience. I think in many homes I've seen, the kids learn a great deal from the people who are working at home as well.
Is privilege always a blessing? Is there a negative side to it that needs to be dealt with by parents?
I think as parents we have to be very, very careful about the things that we allow our children to have and that we give them. I think we do need to think as parents, what do our children actually need? Because we go through these phases in life. Just because I have something now as a 46-year-old, does my 13-year-old need to have the same thing, the same quality? Do they need, could they, if they really want something, put the time in to work for it and save for it? Why not? It's great learning. Again, you're delaying gratification, you're extending conscientiousness and realizing that you get out of life what you're prepared to put in.